The breath.
Yeah.
The breath is
That's
how it's going.
big one.
Just a nice, like, decompression breath. No, I think it's been good. I think it's been good. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but this week, professionally, it, like, wasn't a great week, like, at all.
Yeah.
But, like, life-wise, like, you know, it was fine.
Yeah.
I think it just, like, evens out. I think it's the weeks where, like, personally and professionally, when things are kind of a dumpster fire, that's when I notice it. But if it's just one or the other, I don't really notice.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
I noticed that our social media and our SEO is picking up.
Woohoo!
And for our listeners, it's really cool when, like, obviously SEO, so search engine optimization, picks up so people can find us a little bit easier. But that also means we get submissions, we get requests, DMs, calls that are a bit spammy. And we did get a submission this week that made me laugh. I can't say it because it's X-rated.
Very X-rated.
You know.
But it was a podcast.
And we're more public now.
Yeah. And they were wanting us to look at their podcast.
I did.
Did you actually listen?
A part of it, yeah.
What was it like?
Dude, I'll tell you when we're done recording.
Oh, okay.
Because it'll change the rating of this podcast episode.
Oh, no.
It wasn't like the books that I've read.
Right.
But it was...
The snakes.
Yeah, just not like that book.
The Slytherin snakes.
I gotta tell you about that book, too.
Yeah.
Off air.
Off the record.
But yeah, it was an interesting podcast. So, you know, if any listeners have, like, recommendations for us to listen to, just know we actually do listen to your recommendations.
Yeah. Mainly because we're curious.
Yeah.
So, like, this one was just, you could tell this person was just trying to get, like, views and clicks.
It worked.
But we clicked.
Yeah.
Or at least I looked it up and I saw if it was real and then you clicked.
But then it was like so out of left field. I texted a screenshot to a colleague and friend and also like my family. And I was like, please look at what someone went out of their way to submit on our website. Again, it wasn't a clinical inquiry at all. So like not breaking HIPAA or anything like that. No. There wasn't even a name attached to it or a phone number, nothing.
No.
But it was like a shock value. Like, what? This is a side of business ownership I wasn't expecting.
But so fun. What a day to just get that and be like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Did you have that
we're reaching out.
That same thing happen with your week where it was like one thing was good, the others was like meh?
I wouldn't say one thing's good, the others were meh. I just feel exhaustion is hitting again. I had a good little peak where I was like, yes, let's do this. I'm feeling, purpose and energy and what is it? More purpose, more energy. What is it? Whatever that is.
Yeah.
But then this week they were like waxing and waning of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's because my Rome weeks when I have to drive.
That's a lot of driving.
The hour and a half just really gets me in my feels.
Of course.
My feels.
A really good friend of mine who isn't clinical, so I actually really appreciated the insight, was like, hey, how's it going with work? And I was like, oh, like, it's fine. This week was just kind of like, meh. And I explained why and things like that. And she was like, hey, obviously after the holidays, you felt re-energized. You felt really great. She was, I think by now, if you're feeling this way, it's just because you didn't actually do anything to correct the issue.
Zane.
Honestly,
okay, call me out like that though.
Yeah. So I think it like brings up this idea, and this obviously isn't even the topic today, but it's like, okay, if there's like the cycles, is it a true cycle or am I just not doing anything about it?
Right. I'm just putting myself back into this stuff.
The rat race.
Yeah. Which is why I'm thinking and I'm hoping that the CMPC that I'm doing, which is a another school thing that I have gone back for, for mental performance coaching. But hopefully that's going to like kind of help balance out a little bit of like, less heaviness, more sports performance, mental things.
Absolutely.
Which, when we talk about heaviness,
trauma.
It's funny when we put this one on is what we were going to be doing it today. I got a little stressed. Well, yes, I got a little bit stressed, but then also my head went to Fergie of like G L. I was doing TRAUMA, and then I had to add the OUS because there wasn't enough letters. But I was like, wow, what a great just depiction of how trauma feels for me now specifically.
Yes.
I feel like,
I mean, we were just talking about that, how
we were
normal, very graphic and jarring material is. So we want to talk about trauma today. And I think that we have obviously talked about trauma in probably almost every episode up until this point, but it deserves a standalone for sure.
For sure. So of course with this episode, listen at your own comfort level. We're gonna do, like, what we will be talking about will be some pretty deep and intense stuff. So just go ahead and, like, if it's not for you today, that's okay. If another day you're like, yeah, I feel okay and in the space to which I can listen, then great. We'd love to have you on our page.
Listenership?
Listen on our Spotify page. But we're going to be doing a lot of talk about, like, okay, what it means, recognizing it, what it feels like, education about it, but while also trying not to overwhelm and super be informative and like we're reading from a textbook.
So, okay, for perspective, you'll have less exposure to trauma on this episode than you would scrolling on Instagram.
Or TikTok.
And that's all I have to say about that for right now.
Yeah.
But I'll have more later.
Ting! Okay, so trauma. I feel like people have this defining definition of, like, what trauma is, and it's always, we like to say there's big T and little t trauma.
Do you agree with that?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think, because big T, big T symbolizes, like, oh, it's super big and important, but in reality what we use to define as big T, there's quote unquote, and I'm doing air quotes, little t's that could be just as important in feeling in our body. Sure. So I understand what the premise is behind it. I don't typically use those terms whenever we're talking about it in the room.
Yeah, definitely not in session.
But I think that, like, for general population, for Gen Pop, we tend to define it as, like, big T is, and this is trigger warning here, is like sexual abuse, combat,
that's always
domestic
what I go
violence,
to, is, like,
military, verbal abuse,
just like catastrophic event.
Yes. So there's that, and then a lot of people don't recognize that there's actually other forms of trauma.
So many.
So very many. And looking at this, of, like, what counts and what doesn't count. And even in the counseling profession, we're kind of struggling with understanding, even, like, in the DSM, which is our book that tells us, like, diagnoses and criteria and all of that, of, like, okay, what that means.
Right.
So
we'll say, like, when you hear trauma, what comes to mind? Well, and also, like, what do you notice in your body? I feel like that's an important factor here.
Right. You know, honestly, when I hear the word trauma, it doesn't impact me as much as it used to, which that's just...
I'm in the same boat,
Yeah, because, I mean, Sarah and I, our first experience with counseling was in a community-based center working with children who had experienced trauma. And that was starting in when did we go? 2018?
Early 2018.
Early 2018. So... we got thrown in.
Yes.
Real quick. And when I say, like, working with, it wasn't like, oh, you have one child who's experienced some form of trauma and then another, that comes in for...
It's all of them.
Social anxiety or anything. No, it was every single client we were seeing had some form of trauma. And yeah.
When I think about it, we should have been supported more. Because we weren't. Because I remember, like, at the very beginning, they were like, ooh, your internship site, like, it gets heavy. But I just remember, like, our program didn't support us. And if you think about all the sites that were there, hello? Yeah. Like, there were, like, our site and then one other site. It was very trauma heavy. And, I understand that it's like, hey, like, you need to figure out what you want and what works for you. But it wasn't like a clinical rotation where you just have a semester there. It was years that we were in that setting. Right.
Yeah.
And I just remember that, like, no one really, like, checked how we were doing as, like, very baby green therapists.
Right.
Because, I mean, like you said, it doesn't really mean as much anymore. Like, we still, like, validate and honor every single experience we ever hear. But for, like, us as clinicians, it's just a regular day.
Yeah, the impact feels almost like, okay, yeah.
It used to be so heavy, but it's just normal.
Right. Like I used to cry
Yeah.
after, in 2018. And now I'm like, okay, yeah,
Happy Tuesday.
Here's where we're at.
Yeah.
And and I think to that, a lot of people didn't know what we were doing.
No, they didn't.
Because when they would say like, oh, where were you? We were like, oh, we were at a SANE exam.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's a SANE exam? We're like, we were sitting with a child who had experienced sexual abuse while they were getting an exam for that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, what? And we're like, yeah, so that's what I was doing for the past 2 hours. But
on a Friday night.
Yeah, but back to the question. So for me, it impacts me if I go into like hyper focus mode of like, okay, like I'm tuned in, I'm attuning to that person. I'm like, okay, I'm in this with you. And like my brain like almost shifts to like, okay, I got to check in with this person and their feelings, whether that's clinically or just like outside of the room. What about you?
I think there's like two different reactions I have. One of them is like clinically. So that is like me with clients. And then there's also professionally.
Right.
And that's a big differentiation there for me. So clinically, when I'm with clients, again, you know what? Whenever we post these things on social media, it's always like a clip of it. And sometimes people take it out of context. So in context, like we are both trauma specialists. This is our niche. Like this is our specialty. We are highly trained in trauma work. We are very qualified, very, very specialized in trauma. It drives me wild that I have to say that. But in terms of with clients, trauma work is the most wildly creative work I ever do because it's very similar. I have to lock in and really think of things from like every facet, every point of view. Right. So that's kind of like my clinical brain is just like truly being this lens and a bit of like a shapeshifter with clients just to see like how we've gotten here, where we are, where we want to go, and really just with so much honor and with respect. And you're basically giving them power and honor back where it may not have been before. But then professionally, I get tense when I think about trauma because like earlier, like there's so much scrutiny towards therapists who work with trauma because it's like, this is right, this is wrong, this is ethical, this is unethical. But I think that's just because trauma is such a wildly individualized experience. And so, I mean, we've been doing this for almost 10 years now. Yeah. And every single trauma we have ever worked with looks different. Yeah. And it's been, if it's been almost 10 years, it's been thousands. Yeah. Easily.
It's gotta be.
Which is like, whew. Yeah. And so I think it's this idea of the way that we're talking about it in this podcast, we do have to speak a little bit more generally. So just know that that's not how we talk to clients in session about it. It's just how we're speaking on it generally for like psychoeducation and awareness. And like we always talk about what we do with clients. But in this capacity, like it might just sound a little bit different because we're having to be more general, and that's okay. Yeah. Doesn't mean that it's not our specialty or anything like that.
So defining trauma, because like you mentioned, it's very different, right? And it's different for everyone, quite frankly, because it impacts our nervous system. It's the Trauma Stored in the Body, great book if you guys want to read that. Or The Body Keeps the Score is actually what it's called.
It's like a Bible of trauma.
Yeah, it is. They have an audiobook for it too if you ever want to listen to it in the car. But so there's trauma or PTSD, which is the diagnostic DSM. That is what like you are coded as your diagnosis is PTSD, but then there's also CPTSD, which is not in the DSM
it's in the ICD now.
Oh, but it's in the ICD. Okay,
it's in ICD-11.
Yeah. So essentially, what that C is it's complex, meaning there's multiple sources of trauma that a client or a person is being impacted by. So I actually looked it up.
Love that.
I wasn't going to go through the actual DSM one because you have to go like through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is a very generalized but DSM based diagnostic definition.
Love that.
Lots of D's in that sentence. Okay. So it is the presence of at least 6 symptoms out of 17 distributed among 3 core symptom clusters, served as a basis for diagnosing PTSD. This 3-factor model stipulated that following a traumatic event, which induced fear, helplessness, or horror, a survivor must experience at least 1 symptom of persistent re-experiencing, which is criterion B, 3 symptoms of avoidance or emotional numbing, which is criteria C, and 2 indicators of increased arousal, which is criteria D, all of which must persist for at least 1 month.
There you go.
So there you go.
Well, and I'm sure as people kind of hear that, it's like, wait, that doesn't count this, or this.
Mm-hmm.
That's why complex PTSD is becoming
Right.
Hopefully in the next DSM, which we've been talking about that forever.
Yeah.
Hopefully CPTSD will be more recognized in the DSM in the next publication, but it is recognized among the field now for the most part.
Right.
So really where trauma can come from is when things that maybe happened too fast or too much in terms of severity, even like what didn't happen when something was needed. It could be chronic stress without relief, which I know some people are shocked by. And then honestly, just environments where you had to be hyper aware, hyper vigilant for survival. And this could be in terms of like physical, mental, emotional safety and things like that.
Yeah. They, at a training that I did, and I love this and I say it all the time, is trauma can be defined as something that happens too fast, too much, too quick, or too soon.
Yeah.
Of like, it's just the 2. It's adding the 2 in front of something that occurred. And like a reminder for this is that what is happening is our nervous system is feeling that there is a threat. And that doesn't mean that you are broken. It's not like, oh, there's something wrong with me. It's more just like it's a protective factor of your body is trying to protect you from something that happened too fast, too much, too quick, or too soon. And it's a lot of time not based out of, I don't even know how to say
it's hard
this.
to talk about it generally.
Yeah, it is.
It's about perception.
Yes, that trauma can come from impact and not intent.
Correct.
We will say it that way.
That's a great way of putting it.
Okay.
Because you're right. Like it's how your nervous system perceives a threat. And I mean, it gets gray area because everyone's nervous system will perceive threats differently.
Yeah.
And not every nervous system will label something as a threat.
Right.
So I think it's just taking things with that kind of grain of salt. And also like when you hear someone talk about, oh, I'm a trauma survivor, I've been through a trauma. And if they are brave and open enough to tell you what it is, keep your opinions to yourself.
Right.
Because
let's validate.
Yes, because no matter what your thoughts and your opinions are, their nervous system perceived a threat. Period.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so statty time. Research tells us that chronic stress and emotional neglect can impact the nervous system in ways similar to single incident trauma.
Ain't that the truth?
Ain't it the truth? And we've talked about our fight or flight response, and then actually our fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and fib of like our body going into protection mode. And that's essentially what we have been talking about up until then, is like how our body is perceiving and responding to try and remedy a threat that it is feeling.
So in the clinical world, so not speaking generally, but like with clients, is there like a certain like realm of trauma that you realize a lot of people don't even feel like it quote unquote counts?
Oh God, for sure. Well, with specifically kids and even adults who, you know, were children before, bullying of like bullying in school. And when I was in the school system, like,
especially now.
Yeah.
Bullying is just.
Yeah. And we're taught if it happens one time, it's not considered bullying. If it happens more than one time, then it is. But if you think about it, that one time can vary on what that is. And so I think a lot of people kind of shirk that to say of like, oh, they're just kids.
Yeah.
When in reality, they're kids.
No,
Their
kids.
Brains are operating as children.
They're so malleable.
This is impactful. So bullying, as well as like witnessing and experiencing verbal and emotional abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it doesn't count, right?
Yeah. Or like, especially the witnessing part.
Yeah.
Of like, if it was parents or even, you know, a roommate with their, you know, partner or something like that, of like, well, it didn't happen to me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, fair. But like, there's a lot of things that can impact us that we see and that didn't actively happen to us.
Absolutely.
So, what about you?
I would say it's anything that can qualify as like secondary traumatic stress. And like we'll go into it a little bit later in the episode too. But it is a lot of like bearing witness to a trauma, even if it's not you specifically. I hear a lot of like, oh, well, this doesn't count because it's not like I was like deployed or it's not like I was insert this here. It's like, oh man, like again, it's like it's our last episode of like comparison.
Right. Yeah.
It's just not kind to us.
That is true. A lot of people tie PTSD with military.
Combat.
Yeah.
And obviously, like when we think about trauma, there's so many faces to it. There's so many different ways trauma can look. Because again, like we're looking at everyone's individual nervous systems and their perceived threat. That can come from pretty much anywhere. And so there's obviously like generic or very general like buckets we can think about trauma in, and we're going to go through many of them. It's not all of them, it's just a lot of like the big ones that we see. But again, this isn't a ranking, it's not a hierarchy of trauma, it's just a lot of the ones that we see in the clinical sphere. So it's not exhaustive, not all encompassing.
Right. So first one, early childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So that is, you know, instability with either home or food or even parental dynamics. You know, we see a lot of this with children who are in the foster care system. Emotional neglect, inconsistent caregiving. You know, this is just when you were a kid and you were experiencing things that did not feel comfortable, secure, safe, and I don't know the word to use, stable. Yeah. We're going to use that one.
And obviously there's interpersonal trauma. So that is just a person-to-person interaction that becomes trauma. So it's a lot of abuse, betrayal, just relational stress. And just when you hear like the word like incident between people, that's usually just the interpersonal stress like bucket.
Right. Next, medical trauma. So illness, injury, procedures, loss of bodily autonomy, you know, whether that was an accident that took away some of our movement. I mean, pregnancy, that can also be a medical trauma.
It's a trauma.
Childbirth.
I have to just like plug this for a minute. My sister-in-law is an engineer, and she works she started working in human factors, and now she does like design research and things like that. She has done different studies about birth trauma in the US and how not only our healthcare system, but our built environment. So birthing suites, hospitals, things like that are traumatizing for these women going through childbirth. And she submitted and like she worked on an amazing project where people so bravely talked about their birth traumas and how that built environment made it worse. So yeah, like you said, like birth is a medical trauma.
Yes, it is.
For more than not.
Yeah. Can be a beautiful blessing for someone to have a child, but it can also, two things can be true at one time.
Right. Well, also like they think of generational trauma, those cycles that continue to be perpetuated and they just snowball over time.
Yeah. And then systemic trauma. So this is all the isms of racism, sexism, ageism,
ableism.
Yeah. So all the isms, as well as like poverty, and then of course marginalization.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it's, again, all of these different buckets have such different origins, but they all trigger a threat response in our nervous system. And so when you think about it, what do you feel like within like these different buckets? Do you feel like there's a big form of trauma within these that's usually like minimized or misunderstood more than the others? Because they're all minimized. But have you noticed any of them standing out?
Yeah. I mean, well, one, I'd say medical trauma. I feel like we don't just think about that.
No, we don't.
In general. Of course, generational trauma, most people don't even realize that passes down. But a very specific one that I tune into a lot that I feel like has come up a lot in working with our clients is when a loved one passes.
Yeah.
Or like traumatic grief.
Yeah, it's
sudden death.
interpersonal.
Yeah. of we think like, oh, well, this is just really sad.
Ugh.
And because it's just really sad, that doesn't mean that it's traumatic, because trauma has to be like a bad thing that happens to us. And it's like, okay, we can be both sad and grieving while also recognizing like this was traumatic and hard.
Absolutely.
So
it's interesting. Sad never feels like enough to describe grief.
Yep.
Ever. It's interesting. I minimized medical trauma so much.
Really?
I wasn't even thinking about that.
Interesting.
But I do work with a lot of medical trauma because I work with a lot of the chronic illness community. But like me as a human being doesn't think about it often. I minimize that a lot personally for myself.
Right.
But then clinically, like with clients, like you said, generational trauma is so minimized. And I actually was like talking to, she's a doula and she's brilliant. We were talking about schemas this week. And like I was literally at a book club and we just like started talking about work, and she started to talk about schemas, and I was like, wow, you're brilliant. I love this. This is so cool. And I didn't have my therapist hat on either. But when you think about that generational trauma, you don't think about it as trauma until it's not.
Right.
Again, like you create the schema of like, this is what life should look like. This is what parenting should look like. Our home, discipline, like, and then you're introduced to other things that might deny that fact. And all of a sudden it just rocks your entire world of, wait, what do you mean it's not supposed to be this way?
Right.
And so I do feel like sometimes that generational trauma is so often overlooked because it goes against a schema, and you just don't realize it's as harmful as it is because you just don't know any different.
Yeah. And speaking of schemas, would we look into like the world as it is right now? That brings up systemic trauma.
Yeah, we have to talk about it.
We have to talk about it. And of course, like, we do not go into our views of any of the things. But like, this is heavy for whatever side of the spectrum where you are, all the things of, I mean, the constant exposure that we have to everything that is going on in the world, in, you know, not even just the U.S., but across the entire world, and populations in Georgia, outside of Georgia, and the groups that you are in, as well as other groups that you are not in, of like seeing these things without warning and without protection and without recovery from it, because it's just constant. It's chronic. I mean, think about social media. We have access to that 24/7. The news is on 24/7. And this is not us saying like there is one right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. We're just saying that like it is impactful.
It is.
That there's this much information circulating all the time, and sometimes kind of out of nowhere. You'll just be sitting like watching TV and see a commercial come on. You're like, whoa,
that was murder.
Yeah.
Well, again, like you can be scrolling on TikTok and you go from, here I am unboxing what I got at Target, to then you scroll and then it's a recipe. Then you scroll and it's murder of a child. Then you scroll and then it's like, ooh, here's a day of my life. Then you scroll and it's like, here's someone having this happen to them at a protest. And it's another one saying about a debate. And it's like, our brains are not wired for constant exposure to these things. And I actually I speak about it with clients a lot because this has been brought into the clinical space very, very often lately of like, I can't escape this. And what do I do? And do I speak up? Do I not speak up? I feel like I'm never doing anything right. That's been brought up a lot lately in the clinical space. But I also notice it in my own personal life of, hey, there's a difference between overconsumption of media and staying informed. Yeah. It's going to look different for everybody, but our world is primed to be overconsumptive. That is not healthy for our brains and our nervous systems. We're fried because of it. Yeah. And the reason, because of this, like, our bodies cannot tell the difference between trauma that is occurring to us or trauma that we are witnessing. And so that exposure, like, it increases our stress. Like, statistically, research says that secondary trauma stress shows that repeated exposure to others' trauma can lead to hypervigilance, emotional exhaustion, numbing, anxiety, even hopelessness. And that's without even being directly involved. That's like watching it on TV or, you know, even hearing about it in
all of our therapists listening out there.
They know secondary trauma.
Yes, like we experience that in the room.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's one of those where I hope it can become more talked about because we were exposed to education about secondary trauma, I think in graduate school. I hope we were.
Yeah,
or at least in like our internship, we definitely were. But again, that is, if you bear witness to others' trauma, like that will eventually impact you. It's not a bad thing. It's not a deficit, nothing like that. It's just, again, like we're not meant to receive and be sponges for all of this trauma.
Right.
So a lot of helping professionals are aware of it, like first responders, therapists, healthcare workers, the like. But now it's everybody. It's, if you have a device and you go on it, it's, if honestly, like I think about when I drive to and from work, I pass at least 2 protests a day. And it's one of those where it's like, hey, like thankfully these protests haven't been traumatic, but they're based in trauma.
Right.
So it's just, it needs to be talked about more. So when you notice, or where do you notice like the global events and social media impacting your nervous system the most?
I 100% go into shutdown of like numbing because it's exhausting and I'm exhausted. And, you know, thankfully I do have the privilege and the ability to numb myself when I go home of, you know, I am a white woman and I, you know, am of the age of 30. So like when I go home, I do have that privilege to be able to say like, okay, I'm exhausted. I'm just going to shut down. I'm not going to turn on, you know, the TV on the news, or I'm not going to check my social media. I'm just going to sit for a moment and just, be in the space. But then of course, got to turn that back on.
Yes.
So what about you?
I notice it very similar in the flee response and agitation.
Okay.
So for people that aren't aware, therapists are bound by code of ethics, whether that is the ACA code of ethics for counselors. So licensed professional counselors follow the code of ethics by the American Counseling Association. And then social workers are bound by their own social work ethics code. Both very different ethical codes, but both codes of ethics include being aware of social injustices in the world. And so we are bound by our codes of ethics to be aware of what's impacting our clients and what's going on in the world. And so I know for me, even though I do have that flee response and that agitation response, I intentionally have like time where I like just check in with the world, what's going on, what could be impacting my clients and how, just so that they don't have to explain certain things to me. So I have like that designated time, but like you said, like I have the immense privilege to be able to check out after I get home and on my drive home. But I even noticed that, it was a few months ago, something very significant had happened out in the world, as it does daily at this point.
Right.
And I was at work and all of a sudden my husband sent me a text of like, oh my goodness, did you see the so-and-so happened? And then text me a video. And again, I don't really answer a lot of texts when I'm working, but of course, if it's my spouse, I'm going to open it. But it was a video of the event. And I was in between clients and I later connected with him later and I said, hey, like, I love you more than anything in the world. This isn't appropriate. And it was like one of those enforcing those boundaries of like, I didn't ask to watch this video of this happening. It was very graphic and very disturbing to look at. And I brought up the conversation of like, hey, like, is this normal for you to consume too? Just like, my love, like, are we okay? And so I definitely have that like forever catch-22 of like what's overconsumption versus not. But overall, like I have that, please don't talk to me about this if I'm choosing to shut down, or I have that like, ooh, this is so agitating, I want to run away kind of response.
Right. And like you mentioned it before of the overconsumption, the flooding versus like staying informed and aware. And that varies on all of us. Some people like they can have more
hours
of that knowledge and that information, and okay, if that's you, then that's you. There's others of us who we can't, and so even, you know, the means by which you intake that information, like reading it versus hearing it versus watching it versus hearing someone else talk about it, podcast, whatever it is, of like being able to have that autonomy and that choice, and that is so helpful for understanding that like, yes, it's important for us to be aware because like it supports our autonomy, our values, who we are, as well as like if you are in the clinical space or honestly just a human right now,
how to care,
Yeah, like
how to care for others.
It's good to know, like what's going on, to just check in, not only with others, but also with yourself too.
Yes. And so it's one of those where it's part of me wants to be like, if you find yourself consuming this media, try these things to check in. But honestly, it's everybody at this point. And so I'd say this again, it's not exhaustive, but signs of overconsumption. So this is not staying aware of the media. This is overconsumption of whether it's like media or anything else that could be perceived as a threat by your nervous system. That could be doom scrolling, despite you're feeling worse. You're feeling worse, but you continue to doom scroll. Difficulty sleeping after consuming content, emotional shutdown or irritability. Like I said, that was one of my tells. And then sometimes the helplessness without direction. I know a lot of people will feel helpless with this like fire to do something, but a big sign of that overconsumption is this like helplessness and hopelessness together. So there's not a lot of direction there.
Definitely. And recognizing that two things can be true at one time, right? We talk about this all the time of you can care without literally putting your nervous system into shock and giving yourself secondary trauma from everything that's happening.
I do think something that we were educated and trained quite extensively in was advocacy and awareness. And there is advocacy fatigue. And I know that there's privilege in being able to shut off, and there's privilege in being able to step away. And so that'll look different for everybody. But again, like we said, secondary traumatic stress is very real. And so if you do have the privilege, or if you do have the time and space to be able to step away in the ways that work best for you, that's so important to do, especially because, I mean, in this day and age, it's just harder than ever to step away.
Yeah. If you got to show up for yourself before we can show up for others.
But also like owning when that might be harmful to somebody else, even if it's not intended. So just figuring out what works best for you.
Right. Okay. So what we don't realize is trauma. Commonly overlooked experiences, you guys. So this is when you have experienced trauma in either ways that you show up into the space, or ways that you felt that you needed to show up into the space, or just, treatment in spaces. So being the easy, mature, or responsible child.
The amount of times I got, you are wise beyond your years.
Yes. You're so mature for your age.
Took me a long time to realize that was not a compliment.
Right. It's like, oh, okay, thanks. Like, I didn't choose this life. A lot to get here. Managing adults' emotions growing up.
And then also like that chronic pressure to perform or succeed, maybe even be perfect at doing so.
Repeated emotional invalidation.
Yep. And then just long-term exposure to unsafe systems and environment. I would also expand on that and saying like you seek unsafe and unstable environments. And I actually work with a lot of clients on this before of, if you've been through complex trauma, you will often seek out unstable and unsafe environments because that's what you're used to. You're used to those quick hits neurologically, and it becomes, I mean, that's where the term like adrenaline junkie did come from. It doesn't have to be quote unquote safe to be your comfort zone.
Right. That we can feel comfortable in chaos.
Yeah.
And that's a
trauma response.
That's a sign. So like when working with clients and looking at like what they're invalidating, that's clearly impacting their nervous system, what have you seen?
Honestly, a lot of like the social media content. I hear a lot of like, well, I watched this on social media and it really impacted me, but like I wasn't there, so it wasn't that bad. And the thing is like, we can give space to both. We can give space to, correct, you weren't at this event you saw a video of, so we can't understand what it was like to be in that person's shoes.
Right.
But we can understand what it's like to go on social media and consume this media. And so I see that a lot. What do you say?
Honestly, like not a specific, I would say that relationships just in general, I feel like that's a very common one. But a lot surrounding like work and productivity of them like just pushing. I just gotta keep pushing, like it can't get me if I keep moving.
I say that. So I jokingly tell my spouse, depression can't hit a moving target.
Which, yes, it can. So using that as like, okay, well, I just got to keep being productive. I got to keep going. I got to keep pushing, and using that as distraction, which then causes them to be like overwhelmed. And then because they're overwhelmed, they're starting to feel tired.
Yeah.
But then they use the term lazy, and they're like, I'm just being lazy. And I'm like, it sounds like we're exhausted.
So back to how you said you were doing at the beginning of this episode.
This week has been a highly trauma dense week.
I don't mean to put you on blast.
I
here,
would say, it's so Friday was exciting.
You just kept saying that, and I was like, oh, this sounds familiar.
Okay, so my clients and me, but definitely of that nervous system telling you like we've got to slow down, we've got to take a moment, and invalidating that of saying like, no, I'm being lazy because of that.
Well, and I think that's a really lovely segue into this idea of like over functioning. And this, I mean, when it looks like success, when you're just trying to survive and you're just trying to pursue safety or perceive safety. Because it's one of those where it's, well, you're so successful. What do you mean? Or you're so accomplished, or you're so this or that, or
things are going so well for you. Or there's another one where it's,
well, you're so put together. And something I actually process a lot with clients is, you know, sometimes we'll start sessions and I'll say like, hey, like, how's it been going? What's been going on? How has life been treating you? And they'll let me know. If it'll be like, oh, like, well, this happened and that happened, and then this person said that. And sometimes I'll look at them and I'll say, okay, where does that put your mental health? Because how things are going doesn't necessarily mean anything to do with your mental health.
Right.
It's this idea of like, you could look one way, life could be looking however it needs to, doesn't say anything about your brain, and that's okay. I'm like trying to destigmatize this, like, well, if everything's going well, you don't have to be this or this. No shoulds here, please.
Right. No shoulding yourself. But yeah, that's so true. Of like, when we look at someone, we think that we can judge what their life is like by how they're showing up in the space. And if you're showing up and you're still doing your job and you're, you know, doing your hair and you look a certain way and you're moving and all the things, which we have a podcast on that, I think, right? Don't we have a over high functioning?
Yes, we do.
Yes. So check that one out. But that's like perceived as you're doing great, and that's congratulated. And so when that happens, we're like, okay, well, I can just keep doing this because I'm doing a good job, because everyone's telling me that I'm doing a good job.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times with that, like, we start to take these traits, these responses, and we're like, okay, these are good things. And sometimes that can look like, okay, hyper independence.
Oh, yeah.
Of like, I'm an independent person. I don't need anyone else. It's like, yes, you are right. You can do it. But also, you don't have to. You don't have to do it by yourself.
Well, I also think hyper-independence can lead to, and I think people need to understand, hyper-independence also looks like hyper-controlling. And I feel like we think of like, we have a control episode too. And I think we talked about it there of like, overly controlling, it can sometimes be seen in a certain way. That can look like someone is wickedly organized at their job. And it's almost like excessively so. That's hyper independence. That's just like this hyper vigilance. It could also look like overly controlling about their body, and however that can kind of resonate. So hyper independence can look very different.
Right.
Also like perfectionism. So very similar of like, if I don't cross my I's, or if I don't cross my T's and dot every I, I'm not safe.
And then with that people pleasing, of like showing up being like, okay, well, if everyone else is okay, then I too am okay. Because they're more important right now.
Then also like emotional suppression of just like, just shut down, put it in a box, tape the box shut, put the box at the top of a closet in my mind, shut the doors, lock the doors.
And sometimes that's seen as strength.
It is. Being the strong one.
Yes. Of like, we're good. I'm good. We're good. And it's funny, you know, I'm looking at these, I'm like, but strength comes in validation. Strength comes in feeling, not just pushing aside and being like, we're good.
Right. Right. Well, and it's also, these things develop when rest and support and emotional expression weren't safe. So again, if you find yourself in some of those categories, it's not because you're choosing this sometimes. A lot of the time it's because this was the safest option for you. And I know sometimes it can cause a lot of shame when we do trauma work. And we almost have to like It's me. Parts work. We have to like kind of forgive that past self.
Yeah.
And saying like you did what you could to stay safe in the moment.
Right.
And now it just looks different, and that's okay. And you can forgive yourself because one didn't do anything wrong, and kind of that shame busting piece there too.
And I feel like a lot of times people look at these things and they're like, well, this is just who I am. These are personality traits too. And in reality, they're not. They're strategies that you've used. Some would even say they are coping skills that you have used to be able to survive the situation. They're just no longer serving us anymore. So if you're hearing these and you're like, well, that's just who I've been my whole life. That's just who I am.
Just schema.
Like, yeah. These are not direct personality traits. These are not characteristics. They were tools. They're tools.
So what do you notice show up for you as a professional and you as just like a human being in terms of the overfunctioning? Because I know it can look very different.
Yeah. So for me, it's not different. of like, I would say it's the same for both me, like professionally and personally. I am definitely doing all of the perfectionism, people pleasing, being the strong one, hyper independence. I'm doing all of them. Not only like in my personal life, but then also when I come to work, because I actually showed Sarah this the other day, and I'm about to this is a call out to myself. This is a call out to myself. I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, so I created an entire spreadsheet in Google Doc, Word Doc, with all of the theories that are, there's a lot of them, that are very impactful and helpful in specific presenting concerns. And I created a document so that if I, have a moment where I'm like, okay, Caroline, you have forgotten how to be a counselor, which,
happens sometimes.
It happens. We talk about this all day, every day, but we are humans, and this is a great reminder of that. Then I can just go to that tab and be like, okay, these theories, and then go over to the theory and be like, oh, okay, here's some exercises, here's a definition, here's all these things. And but that's from my own stuff. So that's how that shows up. It's just all of it. Yeah. All of it. Oh. Yeah. What about you?
Mine's different.
Really?
Like personally versus professionally. And I noticed this in actually the last few weeks, where I realized just like the more I just get into the flow of work, and obviously like owning the business now, at work, again, personality is the exact same. Like my personality does not change. And actually like a lot of my like loved ones who like listen to the podcast or see our social media, they're like, you are literally the exact same. And it's really refreshing. They're like, you don't have your customer service voice that you had when you worked retail. Like, yeah, correct. But I will say emotionally, it does look very different. So professionally, I do a lot of emotional suppression, and I'm just kind of like, just chilling. It doesn't really matter. Overfunctioning for me is just like very for myself, not for my clients or anything like clinically. There's no projection there. But for me as a human, I'm just like pretty emotionally suppressed, honestly. But that helps when I have like the end of day check-ins where I'm like, hey, like, I remember working with a client about this, and real human me probably wanted to be triggered, but wasn't. What happened here? And then personally, it is a lot of like hyper independence, and just like, oh no, I got it, I'm good. I say that a lot. We're like, it's all good. Like, I'll just do whatever. That's a big me statement to me.
It's what have you been saying something recently?
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't think it is what it is. I think it's just, but it's okay.
Yeah.
But that's all right. Maybe it is, but it is what it is. Yeah. I don't know. It's been one of those variations recently.
It do be like that sometimes.
It be like that. So yeah. And remembering that like this does impact all of us differently. And that's why, this podcast, we're giving good stuff, but we're kind of fumbling to figure out, okay, like how do we explain this generically when we know so much that it is so individualized. And in that we got to think about body somatic responses. We can't not talk about the body.
It's all stored in the body.
We just love it here. So chronic tension and pain. And we love a good progressive muscle relaxation for that bad boy. Like checking in where you're storing stuff. I know for me it's my shoulders. Yeah. Some people will get actual like headaches. Like my mom gets an occipital migraine.
Ow.
Yeah, and like we stressed. But then also like shallow breathing.
Yep.
Sometimes even like
hyperventilating.
Yep.
Yeah. And then like, of course, GI upset.
Yes.
However that looks, whether it's upset or things just aren't flowing. And then even just that feeling of like the fatigue that does not resolve of like, why am I still exhausted even though I got a full, what's recommended? 8 hours? 9 hours?
8 to 9.
I don't know.
Apparently it's changing based on age, but
won't think about that. But like the fatigue that will not resolve no matter what as well. And then again, that like emotional numbness and overwhelm.
Right. And essentially what this is, and a lot of trauma work with what we do is releasing that from the body because it's stored in there. Like we talk about it all the time of you got your feelings, you got your brain, and then you got your body. Sometimes our body knows what's going on before even our heart and our brain can like process what's happening. Yeah. And so it's taking that story, taking that nervous system entrapment and releasing that and showing like your body, no, I am safe when I think about this, or I am okay in this moment.
Well, and even like reminding yourself that the way trauma is stored in your body might change with age. And however your body is functioning and whatever condition your body's in, especially if we think about like chronic illness as well, like the way your trauma is stored and released, it might look different. I even know, I think it was this week, I was like on the phone with my mom actually, and we were just kind of catching up, talking about the week, whatever. And she mentioned like a medical appointment that she had, very proactive, just like wanted to make sure things were good. Great. And I could tell like there was a little bit of anxiety there. And I even said, without going into detail, I said, Mom, like you've reached the point in your life. She's lived a good amount of life. Like she's great. But I was like, you've lived a lot of life. And the fact that, and I joked, I said, Mom, trauma is stored in your body. And I said, if this is our biggest worry, you're doing amazing. And I was like, and I even said, I said, this isn't toxic positivity at all. I said, this is me thinking about the research about health implications of complex trauma and long-term trauma. And I was like, Mama, you're doing a fantastic job. And your body's doing a fantastic job of functioning without being in nervous system distress. Yeah. So again, trauma will look different, stored as you age.
Yeah.
Give yourself some credit. Your body's doing what it can.
Right. We're just making it one day at a time, you guys.
Yeah, we are.
And I know a lot of times people think like, oh, we're coming into therapy, we're just going to process it. No. We're just going to talk about it the whole time and just all the thing. Sometimes we might talk about it for like 2 minutes and then spend the rest of session like working with the somatic responses that you're feeling of just like processing through, okay, what's the body like? Let's give a good body scan.
Yep.
And then maybe we get back to it. Maybe we don't. And we're like, okay, that's cool. That was good.
Yeah. So if we're thinking about ways to really check in and ground and just building that safety without being overwhelmed, some of the things that you can think about would be connecting to the safety around you. So looking around in your environment and labeling and naming even out loud 3 things that your body can feel that can signal safety of any kind. And that could be, you can see the door, or you see that you have access to water, or you know that you have a friend down the hall that you can go talk to. It can look very different.
And then when we think about like decision making, or especially when it comes to like maybe our content of like, okay, why am I reaching for the phone? What's happening here? Of like pausing, doing a little body scan. Yeah. Kind of a somatic check-in with where we're at, noticing where tension is. Is it stored in our chest? Is it our shoulders, our jaw? Maybe you want to work with that a little bit. Or just noticing it. But then asking like, do I have the capacity right now for this? Like, and this is just a right now check-in. Yeah. This is not saying like, oh, I got to figure this out. I got to get it so I'm fine. It's just saying, okay, right now, do I have this in me? Yeah. And letting that response guide your answer. Guide your decisions without judgment of like, we're just going to let that be there.
Absolutely. And I think just kind of reminding yourself that trauma is just the explanation for patterns that come up that have kept you safe at one point or another. And that the boundaries around like your input are your nervous system protection, not necessarily avoidance. If you are wondering if it's avoidant, try what Caroline just said. It's like really sitting in it, checking in with yourself, looking for somatic cues and seeing, is this an avoidance response? Is this a potential like safety mechanism? And what do I want to do with this information? Not judgment.
Yeah. And with that, like some questions we can just kind of use for like a check-in. It's like, okay, what adaptations or what skills, what, ways that we have shown up into our environment help to serve us through that survival without judgment of just saying, okay, yeah, that served me then. And then maybe even asking, is that serving me now? Like, is that still something that I feel like I need currently? And then also checking in of like, what maybe is our body asking for right now?
Yeah.
What's it needing from us? Checking in with that, like, okay, I'm having a feeling, what need is not being met or is happening that we don't want it to be happening.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, your experience counts without comparison. Again, a lot like our last episode of like, comparison will always just be a thief, and your experience will always count without comparison, without explanation, period.
You're an individual.
Yes.
And it's totally amazing to show up as an individual.
That is.
But yeah, thanks for sticking with us with that one. If you have made it this far, you get a cookie. Here you go.
I love that.
Not an internet cookie, because those are bad. We don't like those. Just junk up your files. But if you enjoyed working with us, always check us out. www.soulhavengeorgia.com. We're on all the social medias of at Soulhaven Counseling. And just a reminder that this podcast is not in lieu of actual services.
Nope.
Therefore, if you think that you are actively in danger, feel free to call 988 or visit your local hospital emergency room. Just get the help that you need. But
yeah, if this podcast stirred up anything in you that might not sit well or it's uncomfortable, let us know. Drop us a line, give us a comment, reach out to us through our website, whatever that looks like, and we're more than happy to help, whether that's working with us or we can steer you in that direction of someone that you can work with. We're happy to.
But until next time, we'll see you guys later.
It do be like that sometimes.